Hi, I'm Stuart from the Norfolk Honey Company, and welcome back to another rainy day here in Norfolk. We're almost through the winter and the cold spring period, and I'm hoping that perhaps at the end of this week and into next week we'll actually be able to get out and start inspecting the honeybees. So it's been a long drawn out period, but I think we're almost into the new active season. If you've not seen the channel before, here we're trying to produce 3 videos a week. One of those I release to YouTube each week, and the other 2, as well as the YouTube video, are released on my Patreon page. And if you check the description, you'll be able to see a link there and go across and have a look at what we're doing on Patreon. We've got lots more content. There's also a podcast that gets released there, and there's also lots of other content that you can take a look at and join in the beekeeping conversation. So today I thought that we'd just have a quick look at how we make up our frames. It's something that I've seen beginner beekeepers try to do without any real instruction, and sometimes it doesn't always work out accordingly and can end, especially with brood frames, can be quite a tricky situation when you're trying to take the frames out of the brood box and they're gummed up with propolis and beeswax. So I'll show you the way that I nail the frames. There are, as with most things in beekeeping, different ways that you can do things. This is just the way that I do them. There will be other beekeepers out there that have different methods, but this one is effective for us and works pretty much all the time. But just to mention the type of frames that we're going to be looking at today, these are a range of different frames from our National Beehives, and they come in different sizes. So this is the sidebar of a brood frame. So if we take a look at the brood frames first, we have a top bar, and this is the bar that you're probably familiar with when you see the videos. It's the one that sits across the top of the brood frame. And then you have 2 sidebars which fit into the top bar, and then 2 bottom bars which fit and combine to make the frame for the entire brood frame, and then the wax goes into the middle. So we'll show you how we push those together. We've also got, this is a made up manly frame, and this has a slightly wider sidebar than the standard frames that a lot of people use, and we'll talk a bit more about those shortly. And these are the sidebars for a standard super frame, and you can see the difference in length first of all, but also when you compare this to the manly sidebar, you can see that the width of it is also considerably smaller. And I'll explain why we prefer the manly frames later in the video. The other thing to mention is that different manufacturers use slightly different methods for producing their frames. So you might have one particular batch from one supplier and another batch from an alternative supplier, and they don't always they're not always cross-compatible. So you have to make sure that you use one manufacturer to make up one complete set of frames, and then if you have another manufacturer's frames, use all of their components to make up their frames as well. Finally, possibly the easiest way and the cheapest way to buy the frames is to buy them in batches of 50. So you can buy complete packs of 50 frames, and the best way to buy them is undoubtedly at one of the trade shows, the Spring Convention, Bee Trade X, the National Honey Show, that kind of thing. But also the manufacturers will also have a special promotion day. They might have an on-site sale at one of their premises, and it's worth going along to buy a complete pack of frames. It's always worth having spare frames, so don't just buy enough frames to fill the brood box that you've got. Always have a few extra spare frames that you can use and have ready for maybe putting into a nuke or for refreshing old comb as you go through the season. So let's have a look at how the frames go together, and we'll then show you how you can make the frames up using just the standard pins that we have here with a small hammer, and then we'll show you the nail gun process that we use just to speed things up. So this is the setup for a British standard National brood frame. Here we've got the top bar, and you can see that it's actually got a piece that's been cut out here and also on this side, and this piece actually comes away from the top bar, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then we've got the two side bars, and these are termed Hoffman self-spacing, and you can see that there's a groove that runs down the middle, and that's the inside part of the frame, and that then turns to face inwards, and this channel is where the wax foundation is guided down and fitted to the top bar. And then we've got two bottom bars which fit in the corresponding gaps at the bottom when everything is fitted together. So the first thing to do is to remove this top bar, and we'll just use a knife to cut through both faces. And with all of these frames, the cheapest way is to buy them as seconds from the shows, and you'll often find that there'll be a rather large knot somewhere in the frame, but if you're careful you can remove that quite easily without causing any further damage. And then we just need to cut the waste out of the top bar, so we just use the Stanley knife to remove the waste and clean that out. And so we've now removed this section completely from the top bar, and we'll put that to one side. So the next task is to fit the side bar into the top bar, and I find the easiest way to do this is to place the top bar onto the side bar, place your thumb on the top, and then just wiggle the top bar with a bit of pressure down onto the side bar, and that seats the side bar nicely into the top bar, and then you don't have to use a hammer to bash it down into place. You could of course use a rubber mallet, and that will work perfectly well. So then we take the next side bar and repeat the process. So I put my thumb on the top and then just wiggle the top bar into place, and for me that works really well. And as I say, if you find that difficult, then using a rubber mallet to just knock the side bars in place works really well. So there we've got the first part of our frame completed. The next thing to do is to put the bottom bars in, and these just pop into the slots in the bottom of the side bars. Like so. And what you may find, as we have here, is that these side bars are not fitting precisely into the side bars, and that's because the bottom, so this is the bottom of the frame, and you can see that this isn't terribly square. So when we nail it together, what we actually do is pull the sides in so that the side bars fit flush to the outside edge of the side bar, and then when we nail that in position and draw across the other side, it then holds everything securely square, and I'll show you that as we nail this frame together. The top bar is used to hold the foundation in place, and we'll show you how that works once we finish nailing all sides of this particular frame. So let's see where we're going to put the nails. So for brood frames, I like to make sure that I nail both sides of the frame. So we have two nails for this side, two nails for the other side, and then a nail at both sides for the bottom bars. And so to just nail this together, we need a total of 8 pins. So let's just show you how we nail this together. just use a small hammer, take the pin and just nail it down into the sidebar. So it's going to go through the sidebar and hold it into the top bar. So let's just finish off nailing this. And then we'll turn it over and repeat the exercise for the same flat edge on this side. You don't have to rush it, you can take your time and make sure that the nails go in properly. And with the brood frames, as I mentioned earlier, these are called Hoffman self-spacing frames, and you'll notice that one side is flat and the other side has a ridge to it. And this is the tricky part of nailing the frame together, because we're going to put a nail that's going to go through this flat side and at an angle through into the top bar. So we're going to nail this particular pin through the flat side and it will come through into the top bar at an angle. And then we'll turn the frame over and repeat the process on this side. So now we've put a nail in both sides of each sidebar, and that will hold it securely to the top bar. So the next task is to put the bottom bars in place. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that the bottom bar is flush with the outside of the sidebar. The bottom bar is cut so that the length of it pulls everything square when you nail them in and have them flush to the outside of the sidebar. So we then put a pin through the bottom and then we'll turn the frame around, and you can see that this particular top bar is not flush with the outside of the sidebar, and if you nailed it as it is, it would mean that the frame is not square. So what we do is just put a little bit of pressure to squeeze the bottom bar across so that it's flush with the outside of the sidebar, and just put a little bit of downward pressure on with your fingers, hold it in place, and then you can just tap the pin through and into the sidebar, and that now pulls it into a square position, and it will make putting the foundation into the frame a lot easier. So we just need to put the second bottom bar in, and you can see here that the second bar actually fits flush because we've already nailed the first bar in so that it sits squarely. So what happens if you actually get it wrong and the nail twists and then folds over? Well, it's no real problem. Simply pull it out with some pliers, take the bent pin away, and then start again with another straight pin. And then we switch the frame around and pin the final nail into the bottom bar. And that makes that first part of putting the frame together complete, and we've now got ourselves one frame all ready to have wax put in it. So now we've got the wax ready to go in, and the thing to notice about the wax is that there are looped wires, so the wires run across, in this particular instance, in a diagonal fashion, and what we have is one end where the loop is slightly larger than at the other end, and the side that has the longer loop is going to be positioned to the top bar. So we're going to feed it through so that the wax has the longer loops at the top bar. And because we squared the frame up, the wax then comes through and slides onto the inside grooves of the sidebars without any problem. So I'll just turn the frame around. So we've taken the wax to the bottom of the grooves, and before we go any further, we're just going to turn the loops out and then drop the wax to the very bottom. And now you can see where that piece of wood that we cut out earlier is going to fit. So we fit it back in place where it came from, and then we're going to pin this in place with 3 of those small pins through the loops that we've just folded forward that now rest beneath this piece of wood. And so there we have one complete frame all ready to go into a nuke or a brood box, and you can use this for replacing old frames where the comb has become dark and unusable, or you could then use this to expand a nucleus colony into a full brood box. So here we have the super frame, and here you can see the brood frame sidebar, and you can see how much longer it is. And take a look at the chart that I'll post either on Patreon or the website to see the comparative lengths. So the only difference really with the super frames to the brood frames is that I only nail one side of the sidebar. I don't nail both sides. So I'll nail one through this point, and then I'll put a nail through in the opposite side on the other side of the top bar. So I'll just do that now. So I said earlier that I'd just explain the difference between the standard super frame and the manly frame. The manly frame uses a wider sidebar. So here's the difference in thickness of the sidebar. And this means that you don't need to use any kind of spacing with the manly frames. So this particular sidebar runs for the same width from the top to the bottom, as you can see, and when you've got the wax in the frame, the bees will generally tend to build it right out to the edge of the sidebar. And one of the benefits that I find of that is that it makes it easier when I'm uncapping the frames. And when you've got a lot of frames to uncap, it's always nice to be able to uncap them more quickly. One of the drawbacks is that because the sidebars touch each other when they're lined up in the super, you do find that the bees will propolyse the sidebars together, so it's sometimes a little bit more awkward to separate the frames. But generally the advantages for me outweigh the disadvantages, and I'm converting all of my super frames over to this particular frame as we go through last season, this season, and probably next season too. So those are the basic principles of nailing together some frames, and if you've only got a few frames to nail, well then using a hammer and some of those pins is perfect really. If you've got lots to do, then you could always upgrade, and that's what we've done, and we've got ourselves a compressor with a nail gun, and we'll use that to pin far more frames together than we could in the same space of time using just the hammer and nails. So this is our small compressor. It's just a small workshop compressor, but it's perfectly adequate for the kind of nailing that we're about to do. So if you don't have a nail gun, then just use a small hammer and work your way through it nice and slowly. And for the beginner beekeeper, it's a skill that you can build up over a period of time, and before you know it, you'll be building lots and lots of frames. Don't forget, we've got our Facebook group and our social media channels, Instagram, Twitter and the like. I'll put all the links down in the description below. And don't forget that if you want to catch up with these videos on early release and also our other content that we post specifically to our Patreon page, then take a look at the link in the description below and have a look at all the additional content that you can have access to there. We'll catch up next time, but for now, thanks for watching.